Okay, here I am. I'm back in Portland after a whirlwind. I don't think would quite capture what it was like to. I really got to get rid of that Santa Claus, but I'll leave it there for now. Yeah, over here. It is after the day after St. Patrick's Day, classic, right? I'm in Portland again, and in fact, I'm really interested when the lights go down and the darkness comes up and the sun goes down and all that. If last time I checked, when I was here, people still had their lights out that they put up in November. So you can't call them Christmas lights, but if we can, then old Santa Claus, who just seems to be hanging around. At this point, I might as well just leave him up there along with the Happy Birthday banner for Jamie and I from January and February. Anyway, I am back in Maine, and after a long journey, which started at midnight Mountain Time, so about 2 o'clock East Coast time, and then I got into JFK, and then I flew up after a couple hours in JFK up to Portland, got home around 10:30, and collapsed, as would be expected. And now I just woke up here this afternoon, doing some work, some great energies happening towards Memphis. We're on the road, which I am, as of now anyway, calling the Via Mafioso, which is I don't know if the best word. I think I'm in this sort of liminal space between feeling really playful because I'm really excited about Memphis and it's all the possibilities of what can happen at that conference next year, but also the seriousness of going to Memphis and engaging seriously in a very serious way with the historicity and cultural history and dynamic that is Memphis. So soulful and soul music and the blues and all that, so I want to maintain that it's sort of in that threshold, and I'm starting to realize that the threshold is something that there are many ways to be in the threshold, and right now in terms of Memphis 2015, I'm in a sort of the threshold of play and seriousness, serious play, I suppose is the way to put it, and that's kind of what came out of Mary Jo Hinsdale's presentation last, I believe it was Friday morning, and Audrey Thompson, my colleague, along with Joe's my colleague as well, but they she sort of pushed on that point of serious play, and I think it's important. So I'm in the modality of serious play as we get going here, and into the meditation. I think it's 34 or 35, written originally March 18th, 2004. This date 10 years ago. And really going now further into the sage. So the last couple days, the category, which is one of the most important in the book, Being and Learning, and again, these are meditations that I wrote every day for 1 year, so I'm commemorating that this year by reading them and commenting on them. And in this experiment, which led to the publication of Being and Learning, and the figure, the sage, emerged as a very important figure. Probably the category for, when people talk about teacher and teaching. I've yet to make this interruption at PES, but my colleague Garcia talks oftentimes, he asks us to consider the educational question, and within that he focuses on the teacher and teaching. And if I were to make the interruption at PES, it would be to only ever use sage, the word sage, as the name for the teacher. So I wouldn't say teacher, I would say sage. For obvious reasons, that would be an interruption. But that's my figure. So for me, if I'm going to refer to this ontology, which feels like an ideal type, and I think I'm more and more inclined to say ideal type, that old philosophical phrase that seems to be going out of fashion with quote-unquote non-ideal theory, which I don't want to even get into because it's such a problematic oxymoron for me. I mean, I get the point, but it's just another example of what I feel is a sort of degeneration, slow degeneration of the force of philosophy. It's sort of like movement towards entropy, right? So toward that original force of philosophy that gave forth idein, right, in the Greek, the force of which is really the power of philosophy. It's first manifesting itself in the form of the concept, what we call ideas and concepts. That force, the power that generates that, becoming degenerated in the way that like you have like a 30th generation bootleg tape, that you a tape of a tape of a tape of a tape of the original, and you've gotten so far away from the original soundboard patching or even the audience tape that it just sounds, the quality of it is just really deteriorated, and there's very little interesting aesthetics at all. So when I hear non-ideal theory, it seems to me at that point that we've really gotten to the point of the 30th generation bootleg. All that to say that using the term sage and the category sage would be to talk about the ideal form in that very sort of original sense of the teacher. And so sage is part of what I'm talking about in the meditations at this point. And sage, as I've mentioned before, is two things I want to repeat here. If you're just jumping on, sage is, and you can go back and listen to some of the meditations from the past week, sage is also the German word that's important for Heidegger, which is saying, sage, so S-A-G-E, capital, and it's also, of course, the figure of persona in the Taoist notion of the sage, so it's a wise person. And then the other point was that this figure of the sage, the one who says the first originary question or evocative speech, or what I'm lately been calling the princeps, the one who articulates the power of the princeps. It's a Latin term for principles, the first words. They occupy a very odd position vis-a-vis the philosophical dialogue, because if the philosophy is emerging in this conversation between friends, then this figure of the sage, it's complicated how they're part of that group. So in responding to James Owen is a terrific student who is out of Montclair State. He's one of Tyson Lewis's students, and Tyson, we did the conversation the other day. He shared some proposals with me that he's thinking of for next year, and one of them was to use Heidegger to talk about the teacher's conductor. And I didn't want to impose sort of the language I've been working on with him, but I responded and I sort of alluded to it, but I didn't use the term the sage. Is possibly what Owen is talking about there with the development of the teacher, the Heideggerian teacher, as a kind of orchestra leader or conductor. And then, so that's a possible way to think through it. And another way to possibly think through it is as the sort of virtuoso. And so something like Coltrane. Coltrane is a figure that kind of represents someone who's part of, but yet at the same time a part of. So he's occupying that. Jerry Garcia as well, Jerry. So they're clearly the most charismatic of the figures. And I kind of developed this idea in the paper that I wrote for Tyson and Megan Laverty, who's another colleague, their book on arts teaching and teaching's art. So I feel like I've been already working on this issue and this matter, this question, but it struck me as new when I got into it. So let me read this, because got to capture the moment, and because it's that time of day when kids are coming back from school and I got to move on to a different modality. So here we go, from 3/18/2004. The sage is as the one who gathers the sayings, whose wanderings collect and passes on various sayings. The sage is a wanderer who, like Diogenes, is a citizen of the world. The sage does not call one place her home, nor one set of people her family, her friends, or her nation. The sage is a sojourner, one who stays for a time in a place and lives there temporarily, rests, reposes, and moves on. The sage's wandering is a journey. To journey is to, quote, travel from one place to another, usually taking a long time, but it also denotes a passage or progress from one stage to another, unquote. The sage as teacher lets learning happen and thus instructs through showing, revealing, by reposing what has been received in silence. How does the sage show? In practicing the art of friendship. The sage reveals the proper relationship with being, proper. We have called the practice hermeneutics in order to convey that poetic dialogue is both an interpretive process and an offering or revealing. Quote, all this makes clear that hermeneutics means not just interpretation, but even before it, the bearing of a message or tidings. And that's a quote from Heidegger. Thus, even before interpretation is the showing of the proper relationship of being, which has been forgotten or overlooked or ignored in the preoccupation with beings as things. The objectification of the horizon of beings, understood by the self-certain subject as a field of manipulable objects that stand against him is an obsession. An obsession is, quote, the domination of one's thoughts, feelings by a persistent idea, image, or desire, unquote. The self-certain subject is obsessed with control itself, with the capacity to dominate and manipulate. When this subject is dismantled through tidings which repose him, estranging him from this obsession, he is held out to the nothing and becomes possessed by wonder. Wonder is the initial starting point of learning, but it is also a reminder of the even before. And that is the proper relationship of being proper. Hermeneutics is as a destruction of the self-certain subject, who stands apart and above and against the horizon of beings, bears the tidings of this relationship. The sage's bearing, comportment, and repose reveals this relationship. The bearing of the sage is the bearing of the message. The bearing of the sage is what Heidegger calls existence. Quote, but existence here is not the actuality of the ego cogito. Neither is it the actuality of the subjects who acts with or for each other and so become who they are. Existence, in fundamental contrast to every existentia and existence, is ecstatic dwelling in the nearness of being. It is the guardianship, that is, the care for being. Because there is something simple to be thought in this thinking, it seems quite difficult to the representational thought that has been transmitted as philosophy. But the difficulty is not a matter of indulging in a special sort of profundity or a building of complicated concepts. Rather, it is concealed in the step back that lets thinking enter into questioning that experiences and lets the habitual opening of philosophy fall away. End quote from Heidegger. The habitual opening, opining of philosophy is the habitus of the self-certain subject. This habitat is the native environment of Homo juridicus. This abode or place of habituation is expressed in the habitual judging of the juridical voice. Something that is habitual is fixed, quote, fixed by or resulting from habit. Something that is habitual is fixed by or resulting from habit. The sage disrupts and intervenes in the habitual judging of Homo juridicus and calls her to wandering. Her tidings, the sage, are evocative and draw Homo juridicus on her sojourn. The sage lures Homo juridicus out of his abode, his habitat, his homeland. In abandoning his habitat, the subject, now wanderer, learner, is no longer homeless. On the contrary, in his former habituation, the wanderer as Homo juridicus is standing apart above and against the horizon of beings, and was obsessed with beings as separate, discrete entities. And it is precisely this condition that Heidegger calls a homelessness, in which not only man, but the essence of man stumbles aimlessly about. Homelessness, so understood, consists in the abandonment of being by beings. Homelessness is the symptom of the oblivion of being, because it is the truth of being, because the truth of being remains unthought. The oblivion of being makes itself known indirectly through the fact that man always observes and handles only beings. And that's a quote from Heidegger. This homelessness is taken up and overcome when and if learning teaching as the proper relationship of being with man, human, unfolds. When this unfolding happens, human beings find themselves caught within the twofold play, which is another way of saying we find ourselves to be, even before we observe and handle beings, to be in a relationship with being. This relationship is discovered in the sojourn of learning, the wandering we undertake with others in the cultivation of friendship. We build communities and community in this wandering, and a processual homeland appears in this journey. In abandoning our habitual habitats of knowing, which are always self-imposed limitation that grossly underestimate our potential, our possibility, the not yet, we are held out before the vast horizon and discover ourselves grounded in it. This grounding, which is the condition for the possibility of our wandering, is our proper abode. And this proper abode is the relationship with being, our relationship with being, or existence, which, quote, consists in our dwelling in the nearness of being. Man is the neighbor of being. That's how it ends. Whoa, okay. Now, of course, again, the coincidence. So I come back here, and I'm sort of in this stage of still like lingering elation and excitement from the conference, and just sort of coming back down and coming out of a big sleep of exhaustion, and getting over that. And then, boom, I'm talking about the sage as one who is a sojourner. The one, and this is right at the beginning, the one who stays for a time and a place and lives there temporarily, rests, reposes, and moves on. Well, I don't think I did any resting, but this is the point. When I was in Albuquerque and I was with so many great friends and building community and doing philosophy, it's a kind of restlessness, or I would hyphenate restlessness, because there's a sense in which it's less rest. You know, it's a repose, or it's a modality that isn't restful in the sense of tired or I don't know. The idea that, you know, when one thinks of to rest, that sounds like it's, you know, you lie down and go to sleep, which is what I did when I got home. But to be restful and to be restless, sort of, are together there in the sense of which, you know, you walk slowly, as I've been talking about, in a certain pace with friends. I mean, I did this, you know, walking to restaurants. You sit and you eat with them, and so you're not shoveling your food down, and in fact you're taking like a 3-hour, 4-hour span of time to walk to the restaurant or cafe, to sit down, talk and eat, and then move on. But there's this constant dynamic, you know, this non-stop talking for hours and hours, and the walk, and you're standing very often and just sort of looking at each other or moving slowly and really listening and really attuning to one another. So there's this interesting play on moving slowly from one point of view, but moving very quickly. So rest and restlessness. But all that having said, just the sense in which the sage, who we're talking about here, is a sojourner. I mean, and the sage's wandering is a journey. And the tweet I put out there this morning was, my sojourn is over. So it's kind of funny, coincidental, and I guess somewhere in my memory I've remembered this whole thing. I would have to, because I wrote it. The sage's showing is the practice of the art of friendship. I think now we're answering this question. It's a sort of, it's a showing that's not a pointing. It's just the sage's gathering in this sense. And so sage is a modality or an ontology. I think this is important. I think I just kind of answered my question, or reminded myself of where I was kind of going with this, which is that sage, it's sort of like the passing of the talking stick. Oh, well, okay, I'm going to have to wrap it up here because Jamie is coming in to greet me, and so I think I'm just going to have to cut it off there with the notion of the sage as a modality that moves around through those the friendship and the cultivation of the community. And the other thing that was really key here that I'll get back to in my pre-commentary tomorrow was the move to Heidegger, and some very important quotations happened. But this was a nice meditation PPM redux, because in this talk of friendship and the discussion of friendship, of philosophy as friendship, so many names were named, so many friends were named in the in this particular meditation. So Again, not contrived. It just sort of happened, and then I think this is what's happening, and so important. So I'm going to come back to these fragments of Heidegger that are really important in this particular meditation when I get back tomorrow, rather, when I pick it up in the next meditation, 319, March 19th. Tomorrow, 2004. So, yeah, that's what it's gonna. I'm gonna leave it at that and pick it up tomorrow. And let's see if I can capture. Now, my son, I haven't seen him since last Monday. I left Tuesday to go to first to Hofstra to teach, and then to New Mexico. And I just got back this morning, and I haven't seen him since then. So, let's. Hey! Hi! How are you, buddy?
Boy, where's my present?
Say hi, friends.
Hi, friends.
Okay, bye.